The three suns of Zara hung like molten orbs in the copper sky, their combined heat pressing down on the endless dunes like a physical weight. Waves of distortion rippled across the horizon, giving the landscape an otherworldly quality that reminded Mira Lin of ancient earth paintings of mirages. 5 years on this planet, and she still couldn't believe the intensity of midday heat. Her environmental suit whirred softly, working overtime to maintain a livable temperature against the 68-degree exterior. "We're approaching the Arkar settlement," called the pilot from the cockpit of the sand skimmer. "ETA 3 minutes." Mira nodded, her attention caught by the looming heat spires that marked the territory of the shade pools. These natural rock formations, twisted into fantastic shapes by millennia of thermal expansion and contraction, served as natural landmarks across Zara's featureless expanses. More importantly, they trapped and re-radiated heat during the cold desert nights, creating pockets of warmth that had shaped Arkar evolution. Ambassador Elena Voss shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Remind me again why we're doing this in person." "The negotiation chambers at Oasis Station are perfectly adequate." "Because," Mira explained patiently, not for the first time. "The Arkar value direct experience above all else. We've been trying to establish proper trade relations for 3 years using our methods. Now we try theirs." Voss frowned, the lines around her mouth deepening. "Earth's resource councils are growing impatient. The rare mineral deposits beneath these sands could solve our energy crisis. We need agreements, not cultural field trips." "The Arkar don't recognize ownership of resources they haven't personally interacted with," Mira countered. "Their consent to mining operations requires ceremonial acknowledgement of the land's value. Today's heat ritual is their way of measuring our worthiness." The ambassador's expression made it clear what she thought of alien rituals determining Earth's access to critical resources. Mira understood the pressure. She received the same urgent messages from the Planetary Commission, the same thinly veiled threats about funding cuts to Oasis Station if progress wasn't made. But Mira had spent years studying the complex social structures of the Arkar. Shortcuts wouldn't work here. The sand skimmer slowed as they approached a cluster of dome-like structures nestled at the base of the largest heat spire. Unlike human habitats with their metal and composite materials, Arkar dwellings were formed from local sandstone, somehow shaped without tools into perfectly curved shells that reflected the worst of the day's heat while absorbing enough to radiate warmth through the night. A small delegation awaited them outside the settlement. Even from a distance, the Arkar were impressive figures, standing nearly 2 meters tall, their bodies covered in overlapping scale-like skin that shimmered with iridescent blues and golds under the harsh sunlight. Most distinctive were the elaborate gill-like structures that lined their necks and extended partially down their torsos, sophisticated heat exchange systems that had evolved to siphon away external heat, keeping their core body temperature stable even in the most punishing conditions. The skimmer settled onto the sand with a soft hiss, and the external temperature reading flashed an urgent warning on Mira's heads-up display. Even with her environmental suit, extended exposure would be dangerous. "Remember," she murmured to Voss and the 2 security personnel accompanying them. "Follow my lead and accept whatever they offer. This is a profound honor." The hatch opened, and a blast of superheated air rushed in, carrying fine particles of copper-colored sand. Mira stepped out first, raising her hand in the traditional Arkar greeting, palm out, fingers spread to mimic their cooling gill structures. "Kari Sun Singer," she called, recognizing the elder who stood at the center of the welcoming party. "We are honored by your invitation to the heat trials." The Arkar elder inclined his head slightly, the elongated crest that ran from his forehead to the back of his neck catching the sunlight. When he spoke, his voice had the distinctive musical quality that had earned the elders their title of sun singers. "Dr. Mira Lin," he replied, using her full title as she had requested in previous interactions. "You bring guests to witness our ways. This pleases the ancestors." Beside Kari stood a younger Arkar, whom Mira recognized immediately. Tolek Var, one of the few of his species who had shown genuine interest in human technology. Unlike the Elder's traditional garments of woven heat-resistant fibers, Tolek wore a blend of Arkar and human styles, including what appeared to be modified cooling panels integrated into his ceremonial sash. "The Sun Singer has prepared the sacred grounds," Tolek said, his accent less pronounced than Kari's. "The trial begins at highest heat." Ambassador Voss stepped forward, her diplomatic training momentarily overcoming her discomfort. "We appreciate this opportunity to strengthen relations between our peoples." Kari's gill structures fluttered slightly, an expression Mira had learned to interpret as mild amusement. "Words mean little under the three suns. Today we will see what your bodies can tell us about your spirits." With that cryptic statement, he turned and led the way toward a clearing surrounded by smaller heat spires. In the center lay a depression in the sand, perfectly circular and lined with polished stones that gleamed blindingly in the sunlight. "The heat circle," Mira explained quietly to the others. "It's where the Arkar conduct their endurance ceremonies. The stones absorb and amplify the sun's heat." Voss's expression tightened. "You didn't mention we'd be cooking ourselves as part of this diplomatic mission. We'll only be expected to remain for a few minutes," Mira assured her, though her own apprehension was growing. She had witnessed heat trials before, but never participated. "Our suits will protect us to a point, but we'll need to remove the helmets to show respect." The security personnel exchanged worried glances, but Ambassador Voss straightened her shoulders. "If this is what it takes to move negotiations forward, so be it." As they approached the circle, Mira noticed other Arkar gathering to watch, some perched atop nearby rock formations, others standing at a respectful distance. This was clearly an event of significance. Kari took his position at the edge of the circle, raising his arms toward the three suns. "We call upon the heat-givers to test these off-worlders, to reveal their inner nature through the purification of fire." The assembled Arkar responded with a harmonic humming that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. Mira felt goosebumps rise despite the heat. "Remove your protective shells," Kari instructed, gesturing to their helmets, "and enter the circle of truth." With practiced movements, Mira disengaged her helmet seals and lifted it free. Immediately, the full force of Zara's heat struck her face like a physical blow. She fought the instinct to gasp, knowing that drawing too much of the superheated air into her lungs too quickly could cause damage. Ambassador Voss and the security team followed suit, their expressions ranging from determination to barely concealed alarm. Together, they stepped into the heat circle. The difference was immediate and staggering. The polished stones underfoot radiated heat that penetrated even through their insulated boots, while the arrangement of the surrounding spires seemed to focus the sun's rays directly onto them. Mira felt sweat instantly spring from every pore, only to evaporate almost immediately in the bone-dry air. Kari and 3 other elders entered the circle with them, taking positions at the cardinal points. Unlike the humans, who were already showing signs of distress, the Arkar appeared completely at ease, their gill structures pulsing rhythmically as they efficiently channeled away the excess heat. "Now we begin the Song of Endurance," Kari announced, and began a low, undulating chant that the other elders quickly joined. Mira tried to focus on the haunting melody, to use it as a distraction from the increasingly uncomfortable conditions. Beside her, one of the security officers swayed slightly, his face flushed an alarming red. Ambassador Voss maintained her dignified posture, but her eyes had taken on a glazed quality that concerned Mira. After what felt like an eternity but couldn't have been more than 5 minutes, Mira's vision began to blur at the edges. Her body's cooling mechanisms were failing against the onslaught, and she knew they had reached their limit. "Kari," she managed, her voice cracking from the dryness. "We must withdraw." The elder paused in his chanting, studying the humans with an inscrutable expression. So soon, we have barely begun the first verse. At that moment, the security officer who had been swaying suddenly collapsed to his knees, then pitched forward onto the heated stones. His companion immediately moved to help him, breaking formation. Kari made a sharp gesture, and several younger Arkar rushed forward to assist, carefully lifting the unconscious man and carrying him from the circle. "Enough," the elder declared. Though Mira detected a note of disappointment in his voice, the off-worlders have shown their measure. They were escorted to a shaded area where cooling mists sprayed from hidden vents in the rock walls, one of the famous shade pools that served as communal gathering places for the Arkar. The unconscious security officer was already there, being tended to by an Arkar healer who applied a gel-like substance to his reddened skin. "He will recover," the healer assured them. "His body simply lacks the adaptations to process the great gift of heat." Ambassador Voss, having regained her composure, turned to Kari with barely concealed frustration. "What was the purpose of that exercise? You must have known we couldn't withstand those conditions." The elder's gill structures flattened against his neck, a sign of displeasure. "Of course we knew. The question was how you would face the inevitable failure. Some species fight until destruction. Others flee at the first discomfort. You humans endured until your bodies began to fail, then requested withdrawal rather than demanding it. This tells us something useful about your character." Mira, sipping gratefully from a container of cool water provided by Tolek, saw an opportunity. "We recognize our physical limitations, Kari Sumansinger. Yet on our world, there is a tradition not unlike your heat trials, though with a crucial difference." The elder turned his attention to her, head tilted in curiosity. "Speak of this tradition." "Dr. Mira Lin. We call it sauna," she explained. "Enclosed chambers where we deliberately generate intense heat and steam. Unlike your trials, which test endurance against hostile conditions, our practice embraces heat as a path to relaxation and purification." Kari's expression registered confusion. "You seek comfort in that which threatens your survival? This makes no sense." "Yet it is true," Mira insisted. "For thousands of years, humans have built these heat chambers. We enter them voluntarily, allow our bodies to be cleansed through sweat, and emerge refreshed in both body and spirit." Tolek stepped forward, his eyes bright with interest. "I have read of this in your cultural database, but thought it might be fictional. You deliberately heat yourselves beyond comfort." "We do," Mira confirmed, "though we control the conditions carefully, making it intense but not deadly." Kari made a dismissive gesture. "What purpose does this serve? Heat is the great reality of Zara. We have evolved to manage it, not embrace it." "Perhaps," Mira suggested carefully, "there is wisdom in both approaches. Your people have mastered physical adaptation to heat. Ours has found ways to transform a potential threat into a source of communal bonding and well-being." The elder seemed unconvinced, but Tolek was clearly intrigued. "How do you construct these heat chambers? What materials are used?" Ambassador Voss, recognizing the potential diplomatic opening, smoothly interjected. "We could demonstrate. With your permission, Kari Sunsinger, we could build a small sauna here, as a gesture of cultural exchange." Kari's gill structures rippled in what Mira recognized as their equivalent of a contemplative sigh. The young one's curiosity often leads him to strange paths. "Very well. You may build this sauna on the edge of our territory. We will observe, though I doubt many will participate in deliberate heat-seeking." As they prepared to depart, Mira noticed Tolek deep in conversation with one of the human engineers who had accompanied them. Already, they were sketching designs in the sand, the young Arkar suggesting modifications that would incorporate local materials. On the return journey to Oasis Station, Ambassador Voss seemed rejuvenated despite their ordeal. "That went better than expected. We've established a foothold, a literal construction project on their territory. It's a start, Mira nodded, but felt compelled to offer a caution. The sauna project is a cultural exchange, not a negotiating tactic. If the Arkar sense we're using it merely as leverage for mining rights, they'll withdraw completely. Voss waved a hand dismissively. Of course. Cultural sensitivity is paramount. But you must admit, this gives us a presence we didn't have before. Her eyes took on a calculating gleam. Besides, who knows what technical information your young Arkar friend might share while collaborating on this project? Information that could be useful for our eventual resource extraction operations. Mira frowned, but said nothing. The ambassador's perspective was precisely the kind of thinking that had stalled relations with the Arkar for years. They didn't view their world as a collection of resources to be extracted, but as a living entity with which they maintained a complex relationship. The following weeks saw frantic activity as the sauna project took shape. A site was selected in a rocky canyon near the Arkar settlement. Close enough for easy access, but positioned so that the structure would be shaded during the hottest parts of the day. This location also offered access to one of the rare underground water sources that the Arkar used to maintain their shade pools. Tolek proved an invaluable partner, suggesting materials and techniques that would make the sauna both functional for humans and acceptable to Arkar sensibilities. Traditional wood was unavailable on Zara, so they substituted a composite of local sandstone and heat-resistant fibers harvested from a native plant similar to Earth's aloe. The ancestors say these fibers once clothed the world before the Great Drying, Tolek explained as they worked. Now they grow only in the deepest shade pools. Mira, who divided her time between the construction site and her regular duties at Oasis Station, found herself increasingly drawn to the young Arkar's company. Unlike many of his people, Tolek seemed genuinely curious about human ways rather than merely tolerant of them. "Why do your people not adapt their bodies as we have?" he asked one day as they installed the specialized heating elements that would generate the sauna's warmth. "Your technology creates artificial environments rather than changing yourselves to suit existing ones." Mira considered this. "Our evolution took a different path. We became tool makers instead of physically adapting to each new challenge. It has advantages and disadvantages, like your inability to walk in the full light of the three suns." Tolek observed without judgment. "Yes," she agreed. "Though that same innovative drive is what allows us to build things like this sauna, taking something potentially harmful and transforming its purpose." As the structure neared completion, word spread through both communities. At Oasis Station, many humans expressed interest in experiencing a real sauna built with Arkar materials and knowledge. Among the Arkar, reactions were more mixed. Young ones like Tolek were curious, while many elders, following Kari's lead, remained skeptical or even dismissive. They waste energy creating heat they cannot naturally manage. Kari remarked during a council meeting that Tolek later reported to Mira, "It is like a sand crawler trying to swim." Despite these misgivings, the day arrived for the inaugural use of what they had come to call the Steam Sanctuary. The structure was simple but elegant, a domed chamber large enough to accommodate up to 10 beings, with multiple levels of seating carved from local stone. A clever ventilation system incorporated natural crevices in the canyon wall, allowing for controlled release of steam. The heating element combined human technology with Arkar knowledge of heat-conducting minerals. A small group gathered for the occasion, Mira and several colleagues from Oasis Station, including Ambassador Voss, who had insisted on attending for diplomatic purposes, from the Arkar community. Tolek had brought 5 other young innovators who had helped with construction, plus, somewhat surprisingly, Kari himself. "I come to witness, not participate," the elder clarified, his tone making it clear he expected nothing of value from the experience. Mira nodded respectfully. "Your presence honors us. Sun Singer, please observe as much or as little as you wish." The humans entered first, removing their environmental suits and changing into the simple wraps traditionally worn in saunas. Mira had taken care to ensure these garments would not offend our sensibilities regarding physical modesty, which were different from but no less important than human norms. Once settled on the stone benches, Mira performed the ceremonial first pouring of water over the heated stones. A satisfying hiss filled the chamber as steam billowed upward, immediately raising the humidity and intensifying the perceived heat. Ambassador Voss closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. Remarkable. It actually feels like the bathhouses in New Helsinki. You've captured the essence perfectly. The other humans murmured agreement, their bodies gradually relaxing as the therapeutic effects of the steam began to work on tense muscles and open pores. After allowing them a few minutes to acclimate, Mira invited the Arkar observers to enter if they wished. Tolek was the first to accept, his natural curiosity overcoming any hesitation. He stepped cautiously into the chamber, his gill structures fluttering rapidly as they encountered the unfamiliar combination of heat and moisture. "This is different," he said, settling onto a bench opposite Mira. "Our bodies are efficient at removing dry heat, but this moist air presents a new challenge." One by one, the other young Arkar entered, their reactions ranging from discomfort to fascination. Finally, to everyone's surprise, Kari appeared in the doorway. "I would experience this strangeness myself," he announced, his dignified bearing unchanged by the unusual circumstances. The humans shifted to make room for the elder, who lowered himself onto a bench with deliberate movements. For several minutes, he sat in silence. His ancient eyes closed as his gill structures worked to process the steamy environment. Mira maintained a respectful silence, allowing the experience to speak for itself. This was the moment of truth. Would the Arkar elder see value in this human practice, or dismiss it as foolishness? After what seemed an eternity, Kari opened his eyes. "This purposeful heat differs from the sun's challenge," he said slowly. "It does not seek to overwhelm, but rather to embrace." His gill structures rippled in a pattern Mira had never seen before. "I find it not unpleasant. Coming from Kari, this was high praise indeed." Mira exchanged a delighted glance with Tolek, who looked as though he was struggling to maintain proper decorum in the presence of his elder. The session continued for nearly an hour, with periods of comfortable silence interspersed with gentle conversation. The humans demonstrated traditional sauna practices, the gradual building of heat, the occasional addition of scented herbs to the steam, using local Zara plants Mira had determined were safe for both species, and the importance of adequate hydration throughout. By the time they emerged into the relative coolness of the canyon's shade, a subtle but significant shift had occurred. The Arkar participants, even Kari, seemed more relaxed in the humans' presence, the usual formality softened by their shared experience. "Your steam ritual has merit," Kari acknowledged as they prepared to depart. "It is not our way, but it speaks to something universal." He inclined his head slightly toward Mira. "Perhaps there is wisdom in choosing to embrace that which could harm, rather than merely defending against it." Ambassador Voss, seeing an opening, stepped forward. This successful exchange could mark the beginning of many mutually beneficial collaborations between our peoples. Honored Sunsinger. Kari's gill structures flattened slightly, the subtle warning sign Mira had learned to recognize before the ambassador could continue her diplomatic overture. Mira quickly interjected. "Each collaboration must grow naturally, like the heat-resistant plants that emerge after Zara's brief rains," she said, using an Arkar metaphor she had learned from Tolek. "We are grateful for today's shared experience and seek no immediate advantage from it." The elder's expression softened, and he nodded approvingly before departing with his fellow Arkar. Only Tolek remained behind to help with the post-session maintenance of the sauna. Once they were alone, Ambassador Voss rounded on Mira. "What was that?" I was about to broach the subject of preliminary surveying rights for the northern mineral deposits, which would have undone everything we just accomplished. Mira countered firmly. The Arkar don't negotiate the way we do. Today was about building trust and understanding, not extracting concessions. Dr. Lin, Voss said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Perhaps you've forgotten that your research station exists to facilitate Earth's access to critical resources. The Planetary Commission doesn't fund cultural exchange programs out of academic interest. Mira held the ambassador's gaze steadily. I haven't forgotten our mission, but I know that pushing too hard, too soon will only result in complete withdrawal by the Arkar. They've done it before with other human outposts. Voss narrowed her eyes but said nothing more, striding away toward the waiting transport. Mira sighed, turning back to help Tolek with the cleaning rituals. Your leader hungers for the shining stones beneath the sacred dunes, Tolek observed quietly. Mira didn't bother denying it. Resources are scarce on our homeworld. We seek them wherever we can find them. Our elders say that hunger without respect leads to emptiness, not fulfillment. He paused in his work, fixing Mira with an earnest gaze. I believe your steam sanctuary could teach my people about respect, not just for your ways, but for the possibility of finding strength in seeming weakness. Over the following weeks, the steam sanctuary became an unexpected success. Word spread among both communities, and soon regular sessions were being held, sometimes led by humans, other times by Arkar, who had embraced the practice. Tolek, in particular, had become an enthusiastic advocate, developing modifications that made the experience more meaningful for his people. What began as curiosity was evolving into genuine cultural exchange. Arkar, who participated in the sauna rituals, began inviting human friends to observe their traditional ceremonies, not just as tourists, but as respected guests. Humans from Oasis Station shared their knowledge of water conservation and botanical cultivation, helping the Arkar expand their shade pools. Ambassador Voss, while still focused on her resource acquisition mission, reluctantly acknowledged the diplomatic progress being made through these unofficial channels. She had even begun to participate in the sauna sessions herself, developing something approaching a cordial relationship with Kari during their shared time in the steam. But not everyone welcomed these developments. Among the Arkar, a faction of traditionalists led by an elder named Nazator had begun to speak out against what they saw as corruption of their ancient ways. The off-worlders mock our sacred relationship with heat, Nazator proclaimed in the communal gathering spaces. They transform our trial of endurance into a game of pleasure. Kari grows soft in his final cycle, allowing these pale creatures to diminish our heritage. Similarly, at Oasis Station, certain members of the resource extraction team grew impatient with what they perceived as endless delays. Chief among them was Operations Director Hendrik Varga, who made no secret of his belief that the Arkar were being accorded too much deference. They're sitting on top of enough rare Earth elements to solve Earth's energy crisis for a decade, he complained during a staff meeting. Yet we're spending our time building saunas and attending alien heat rituals instead of drilling test sites. These undercurrents of discontent remained largely beneath the surface until the announcement of a special ceremony to mark the changing of Zara's primary sun cycle, an important cultural event for the Arkar. For the first time, humans had been invited to participate in certain aspects of the traditional celebrations, including a communal gathering in the largest shade pool. As a culminating event, Kari proposed a joint ceremony at the Steam Sanctuary, where both species would share their heat-related rituals as a symbol of growing understanding. It was unprecedented, a formal acknowledgement that the human practice had value in Arkar culture. Mira, who had been asked to help coordinate the human participation, found herself working closely with Tolek to plan the details. Their collaboration had grown into a deep friendship that transcended their biological differences, founded on mutual respect and genuine curiosity about each other's perspectives. The Sun Singer takes a great risk with this ceremony. Tolek confided as they prepared the sanctuary for the upcoming event. Naztor and his followers see it as blasphemy against the ancestors. Are they a serious threat? Mira asked, concerned both for the ceremony and for Kari standing among his people. Tolek's gill structures rippled in a pattern that indicated uncertainty. They are few, but passionate. Most Arkar respect Kari's wisdom, even when they do not fully understand his decisions. What neither of them knew was that opposition was brewing on the human side as well. Director Varga, frustrated by Ambassador Voss's increasingly conciliatory approach to negotiations, had decided to take matters into his own hands. If the Arkar could be shown as dangerous or unpredictable, it would justify more aggressive resource acquisition strategies. The day of the ceremony arrived, marked by unusual atmospheric conditions that painted Zara's sky in spectacular swirls of amber and gold. The three suns aligned in a configuration that occurred only once every 17 cycles, according to Arkar timekeeping. The festivities began in the main shade pool, where Arkar of all ages performed traditional songs and dances celebrating their relationship with heat and survival. Human guests watched in respectful silence, many visibly moved by the haunting beauty of the performances. As the main ceremony concluded, Kari rose to address the gathered crowd. Today marks not only the sacred alignment of the heat givers, but a new alignment between peoples. For countless generations, we Arkar have viewed heat as the great challenge to be endured. Our off-world visitors have shown us another path, that heat embraced willingly can unite rather than test. He gestured toward the canyon where the steam sanctuary stood ready. Let us proceed to share both our traditions in the spirit of mutual respect. The procession to the sanctuary was solemn yet hopeful, with humans and Arkar walking side by side rather than in separate groups. Mira found herself next to Kari, with Tolek and Ambassador Voss just ahead of them. Your steam chambers have changed more than you know. Dr. Mira Lin, the elder said quietly. Some of our young ones have begun to construct similar spaces within our traditional dwellings, blending your concepts with our ancient practices. I'm honored that our tradition has found resonance with your people, Mira replied sincerely. Kari's ancient eyes studied her face. Not all change comes easily. There are those among both our kinds who fear what is different, who cling to separation as safety. Before Mira could respond, they arrived at the sanctuary. The structure had been decorated for the occasion with symbols meaningful to both cultures, Arkar heatstone arrangements alongside human botanical elements that Mira had cultivated specifically for their aromatic properties when added to steam. The ceremony was designed to begin with an Arkar heat ritual, modified to be survivable for the human participants, followed by a traditional sauna session led by the humans. Kari would preside over the first portion, while Mira would guide the second. As the participants prepared to enter, Mira noticed Director Varga among the human contingent, an unexpected presence, given his vocal criticism of the cultural exchange program. His expression was unreadable as he took his place among the others. The first phase proceeded smoothly, with Kari leading the assembly in rhythmic chants that the Arkar believed helped channel and honor the energy of the three suns. The humans joined in as best they could, their voices creating an interesting counterpoint to the native harmonics. Then came the transition to the sauna portion. Mira stepped forward to explain the process to those who had not yet experienced it, emphasizing both the physical and spiritual aspects of the practice. The steam embraces all equally, she concluded, reminding us that despite our different biologies, we share the universal experience of finding strength through voluntary challenge. As the participants entered the sanctuary, Mira noticed that Director Varga had positioned himself near the heating controls, ostensibly to observe their operation. But something in his manner set off warning bells in her mind. She was about to approach him when a disturbance at the entrance caught her attention. Naztor, the traditionalist elder who had opposed the cultural exchange, pushed his way into the chamber, flanked by several followers. His gill structures were fully extended in a display of aggression rarely seen in our car society. "This abomination ends now," he declared, his voice carrying the harmonic resonance that gave the Sun Singers their authority. "Off-worlders mock our sacred relationship with heat. Turning trial into pleasure, they soften us to take what lies beneath our sands." Kari rose to face his challenger, his own posture dignified but firm. "You dishonor yourself and our ancestors with this disruption. Nazator, the ceremony has been approved by the Council of Elders. A council you have led astray," Nazator countered. "The ancestors send me to correct your path." In the confusion, Mira lost sight of Director Varga. A moment later, she felt rather than heard a change in the sanctuary's systems, a sudden surge in pressure that made her ears pop painfully. Before she could react, the heating elements glowed bright orange, far exceeding their designed capacity, and jets of scalding steam erupted from multiple vents simultaneously. Chaos erupted as both humans and Arkar scrambled to escape the suddenly dangerous conditions. Even the Arkar, with their natural heat resistance, were unprepared for the intensity and suddenness of the temperature spike. Through the billowing steam, Mira saw Kari stumble, overcome by the extreme conditions, without hesitation. Tolek fought his way through the scalding mist to the Elder's side, lifting the ancient Arkar, despite the obvious pain it caused his own exposed skin. Mira rushed to the control panel, desperately trying to shut down the runaway heating system. She found Director Varga there, his hands on the override controls, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "What have you done?" she demanded, horrified. "Demonstrated the truth," he replied coldly. "These aliens aren't ready for partnership with humanity. They're too volatile, too unpredictable. The Resource Commission will have no choice now but to authorize direct intervention." Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. "You sabotaged the sanctuary to provoke a conflict." "I accelerated the inevitable," Varga corrected. "Now stand aside, Dr. Lin. The damage is done." Instead, Mira lunged for the emergency shutdown, managing to activate it despite Varga's attempt to stop her. The heating elements powered down, but the sanctuary was already filled with dangerous levels of steam and heat. Outside, the evacuation continued in disarray. Nazator and his followers were attempting to separate the Arkar from the humans, claiming the disaster proved the off-worlders' treachery. Injured members of both species lay on the ground, suffering from various degrees of burns and heat exposure. Tolek emerged from the steam carrying Kari, the Elder's normally vibrant scales dulled by the extreme conditions. Ambassador Voss, showing unexpected courage, was helping other injured Arkar to safety, her diplomatic training set aside in favor of basic humanitarian aid. Mira turned back to Varga, fury overriding her usual composure. "You could have killed dozens of people, humans and Arkar alike. This wasn't acceleration, it was sabotage." The director's expression hardened. "Sometimes hard choices must be made for humanity's survival. Earth can't afford to wait years for these primitives to decide whether they'll share resources we desperately need." "That decision isn't yours to make," came Ambassador Voss's voice from behind them. She stood in the doorway, her face streaked with sweat and soot, but her eyes clear and determined. "And neither primitive nor desperate describes what I've just witnessed out there. I saw members of both species risking their lives to save each other." Before Varga could respond, security personnel from Oasis Station arrived, summoned by emergency protocols triggered by the sanctuary's failure. Voss straightened to her full height, her diplomatic authority reasserting itself. "Director Varga is to be detained pending investigation for sabotage and attempted mass casualties," she ordered. "I want a full technical analysis of the control systems and clear documentation of all injuries," as Varga was led away, protesting that he had acted in Earth's best interests. Mira hurried outside to assess the damage. The scene was one of both tragedy and unexpected unity. Despite Naztor's attempts to separate the groups, many Arkar and humans were working together to treat injuries and account for all participants. Most encouraging was the sight of Tolek and several other young Arkar, using their knowledge of both traditional healing methods and human first aid techniques to treat the wounded of both species. Kari had been placed in a cooling pool where he was beginning to show signs of recovery. Mira approached cautiously, not wanting to interfere with the healing process. The elder's eyes opened as she neared, focusing on her with effort. "This was not your doing, Dr. Mira Lin," he said, his voice weaker but still carrying that distinctive musical quality. "I saw the truth before the steam blinded me. One of our people betrayed your trust," Mira acknowledged, kneeling beside the pool. "There can be no excuse for such an action." Kari's gill structures rippled faintly. "And one of ours sought to prevent understanding between our peoples. Neither represents the true spirit of their kind." He reached out, his scaled hand closing gently around Mira's wrist. "What matters now is how we respond to this shared pain." In the days that followed, both communities faced difficult reckonings. Director Varga was confined to quarters at Oasis Station pending return to Earth for trial, his actions condemned by both the station leadership and the Planetary Commission. Ambassador Voss, chastened by how close they had come to diplomatic disaster, adopted a more patient approach to resource negotiations. Among the Arkar, Naztor's influence waned, as many who had previously supported his traditionalist views were moved by the selfless actions of the humans during the crisis. Kari, once recovered, called a gathering of all elders to discuss the path forward. Mira and Tolek, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding not just the physical structure of the sanctuary, which had been severely damaged, but the trust that had been shaken by the incident. They worked side by side, their friendship deepened by shared adversity. "My people have a saying," Tolek told her as they cleared debris from the sanctuary floor. "Heat reveals true nature, like sun on sand shows hidden patterns." Mira smiled tiredly. "We have a similar concept. Fire tests gold, adversity tests character." "Perhaps that is why the steam chambers spoke to both our kinds," he mused. "They create a space where we voluntarily face challenge together, revealing what lies beneath our differences." The reconstruction process became a community effort, with both humans and Arkar contributing materials, labor, and new ideas. The redesigned sanctuary incorporated additional safety features, but also expanded to include elements of traditional Arkar heat rituals alongside the human sauna concept. Most significantly, Kari proposed that the new structure be built not on the periphery of Arkar territory, as the original had been, but in a central location between the human outpost and the native settlement, a literal middle ground that symbolized their commitment to continued exchange. 3 months after the disastrous ceremony, the new steam sanctuary was completed. Unlike the hurried, makeshift quality of the first structure, this one had been built with care and deliberation, its design reflecting the best of both cultures. The dome was higher and more spacious, incorporating heat-channeling techniques from Arkar architecture alongside human innovations in steam control and comfort. For the dedication, Kari suggested a variation on traditional ceremonies. Instead of separate rituals for each species, he proposed a true fusion. Arkar heat runners would carry human guests into the sanctuary, symbolizing their role in helping the physically vulnerable humans safely experience the transformative power of heat. On the appointed day, Mira found herself standing beside Ambassador Voss as they prepared to be carried in the ceremonial procession. The diplomat had undergone her own transformation during the crisis and its aftermath, developing a genuine respect for the Arkar that transcended political calculation. "I never understood until recently," Voss confided quietly. "We've been approaching negotiations all wrong, seeing only what we could extract from this world, not what we might build together." Kari approached, resplendent in ceremonial garments that accentuated his gill structures and the ancient crest that marked him as a sun singer. It is time. Friends from the stars, are you prepared to entrust yourselves to our care? Mira nodded and found herself gently lifted by Tolek, while other designated carriers took charge of the remaining human participants. The sensation was strange but not unpleasant, being borne with reverent care by someone whose physical strength and heat resistance far exceeded her own. The procession moved slowly toward the new sanctuary, accompanied by the harmonic humming that marked significant Arkar ceremonies. As they approached, Mira saw that the entrance had been designed with dual symbolism. The archway incorporated both the flowing lines of Arkar sacred geometry and the clean, functional aesthetic of human engineering. Inside, the space glowed with diffuse light filtered through carefully placed crystals that the Arkar believed captured and purified the sun's energy. Steam rose in controlled patterns from the central stones, which had been arranged in a spiral pattern significant to both cultures, representing cycles of renewal to the Arkar and the golden ratio to humans. The carriers placed their human charges on comfortable benches, then took their own places in the chamber. Kari moved to the center, raising his arms in a gesture that mirrored his stance during the heat trials that had begun this unexpected journey. "We gather in the space between worlds," he intoned, his voice setting the crystal fixtures vibrating subtly. "Not to endure heat as adversary, nor to embrace it merely as comfort, but to acknowledge it as teacher. In voluntary vulnerability, we find connection. In shared challenge, we discover strength beyond mere survival." Mira felt the truth of his words as the ceremony unfolded. The steam enveloped them all equally, making no distinction between human and Arkar. In this shared space, their biological differences became less significant than their common experience. The universal response to heat that transcended evolution and adaptation. Ambassador Vos, when her turn came to speak, surprised everyone with the depth of her understanding. "On our homeworld, ancient wisdom teaches that the strongest metals are those that have passed through fire," she said. "Perhaps the strongest bonds between peoples are likewise those that have been tested by adversity and emerged intact." As the ceremony concluded, Mira realized that what had begun as a simple cultural exchange had evolved into something far more profound. The steam sanctuary represented not merely a blending of practices, but a new philosophical approach, one that recognized strength in deliberate vulnerability and wisdom in embracing rather than merely enduring challenge. In the months and years that followed, the sanctuary became the nucleus of an expanding cooperation between humans and Arkar. What began with sauna rituals grew to encompass joint research initiatives, cultural exchanges, and eventually, carefully negotiated agreements for limited resource sharing that respected the Arkar's sacred relationship with their world. Most remarkably, the concept of steam ceremonies spread beyond Zara, carried by humans returning to Earth and other colonies. The practice became known as a powerful tool for cross-cultural communication, creating neutral spaces where different species could experience shared vulnerability as a path to mutual understanding. For Mira, the greatest satisfaction came not from the diplomatic successes or the scientific breakthroughs that emerged from their collaboration, but from the genuine friendships that flourished between the two species. Watching Tolek teach a group of human children about Arkar cooling techniques, or seeing Kari and Ambassador Voss engaged in philosophical discussion while enjoying the sanctuary's steam, she recognized that they had discovered something precious, a way to transform the challenges that divided them into experiences that united them. "We thought we came to Zara to teach the Arkar about embracing heat," she wrote in her final research journal before retiring from active service. "In truth, they taught us the deeper lesson that true strength lies not in conquest or mere endurance, but in the conscious choice to make ourselves vulnerable together. In the sanctuaries of steam we built between our worlds, we found not just cultural exchange, but a new kind of resilience, one founded on connection rather than separation, on transformation rather than mere survival." As the three suns set over the copper dunes of Zara, the steam sanctuary glowed from within, a beacon of warmth and welcome in a harsh landscape. Its light reaching out to guide both humans and our car toward a future neither could have imagined alone.